What's up? This is Dominique Beaumonte, and you are listening to Season with Salt, the podcast. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Season with Salt, the podcast. My name is Dominique Beaumonte, and I am your host, and this is the second installment of Ask Domo. I first want to thank you all for sharing these great questions and want to encourage you to keep them coming. If you would like to have one of your questions answered, you can hit me up on social media at SWS the podcast, or you can email me at swsthepodcast@gmail. All right. So we got a couple of really, really good questions that I want to take the time to answer. And the first question is, I don't like going places unless I am explicitly invited by the host of the event because I've had bad experiences. My friends are upset with me because I refuse to tag along. How do I explain to them why I am not just going to show up to things? First of all, let me affirm that this is a reality, and I also identify with this. And so the advice that I'm going to give you is not necessarily advice that I have fully embraced myself, but I'm working on it, right? I think the key thing, especially with friends, is to not wait until you get the invitation to share that you have these expectations around invitations. And so I think it's important to be proactive. So before the event comes, I think it's good to just say, hey, y'all, like, I really want to go to these events, but y'all know I'm funny style. Like, I need to know that I am invited to this. And a part of it is, and maybe you have a really good example that they can resonate with, or maybe they remember something that they went to and you didn't feel comfortable. I think ultimately it's no fun to have events or to go to events in groups or even just two people when the person that you're invited can't have fun for whatever reason. Maybe they don't feel comfortable and what have you. And so I think it's important to say, hey, I really want to enjoy myself. I don't want to be a burden once we get there. And I'm really uncomfortable when I go to events and I don't feel invited. So, you know, get me, sometimes it's as simple as saying, well, sometimes it can be weird because I've had friends say, oh, yeah, John said that you could come. I asked him specifically. And so then it kind of feels like, that conversation that when you're the host and like a friend of a friend asks if somebody else can come and you're like a vibe is a vibe. And yeah, I have an example because I recently went to an event, and I'm not really a social like crew type person, but I recently had invited somebody else to join a group, and there was somebody in the group that was like, no, I'm not coming. And I'm like, wait, like, why? The person did end up coming, but it was different because they didn't feel comfortable with the new person like tagging along. So I know for a fact that it can be really uncomfortable to be like a tag along, especially if like it's married couples and there's a single person, or like people know each other indirectly from something from the past. Or so I think you have to be careful with that. I also think that people like myself and the person who submitted this question, like sometimes we miss really important things because we can't do things spontaneously. And I guess we have to challenge ourselves, like, what kind of fun would I miss? Like, how often can I just let my guard down and just be like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'll just leave early. Sometimes it's just as simple as driving your own car, just so that you feel more comfortable, so that you feel like you're not getting stuck somewhere. Also, I know a lot of my friends know that if I go somewhere and I might feel uncomfortable, I'm definitely going to just leave, right? And I might not say bye, right? And I might like leave and then get in my car and then text and say, hey, y'all, I left. I wasn't having a good time, but if there's somewhere else that y'all are going afterwards, let me know. Or, if you don't want the mood to be weird, because sometimes that can be really weird for people, especially like extroverts who are like, why would you leave? That's dumb. You can just say, you know what, I realized I forgot something, or I needed to run to the store, to get something, like, and I might come back, I don't know. Like, it just depends. So I think that, and then I think the other piece is like tapping into, like, do I have a discomfort with showing up to things like that I feel uninvited to because I'm struggling with rejection, or I'm an introvert, or, and I think we have to ask ourselves, are there opportunities to challenge ourselves as we grow and develop? But also, I think it's good for our friends and the people around us and our family members and our favorite cousins or whomever to really realize that not everybody has the same experience when they go to events. And, you know, if I already know that you feel uncomfortable and I've invited you to an event that you weren't directly invited to, it really is my job to like make sure that you're having a good time, make sure that you meet people and that you're introduced. And some people are really lousy at that. So I already didn't want to come. I already was not invited directly. And now that I'm here, I have to fend for myself. Well, depending on what mood I'm in, that might not go over too well. So I might just be creeping to the corner and just people watching. And then sometimes that comes off as like, oh, like your little friend that you invited is arrogant or not, engaged or not present. And so I think that we just really have to share our expectations with our friends and say, help me to be present and I need this. And it would be really nice, even if you're invited and you're allowed to have a plus one, like, also it is really awkward when I'm already uncomfortable going to an event and then you play it down like, oh, you needed somebody to go with. And so you've asked 16 people and I'm literally the 17th person that you asked, like, really not gonna go. Like, so I think it behooves the inviter to like make sure that they use language that doesn't contribute to, I'm gonna expose you to something that makes you really uncomfortable and I'm gonna leave you high and dry, so on and so forth. So hopefully that helps. It helps me. I think about things that I have gone to in the recent and how uncomfortable I felt. And every time I do it, I'm like, I'm never going to any, I'm never doing this again. I had a recent experience where I went to church because I wanted to support something that was happening. And I just felt really awkward because I knew of some of the people there, but I just felt weird, right? I think sometimes for people like me, it's good to go with somebody, just to say, hey, I'm gonna run down here. Would you like to come with me? Because then I feel more comfortable, like so I'm not by myself. But anyway, listen, I can give you a whole gamut of tricks and experiences related to being an introvert in public events and spaces. It's not always that fun, but sometimes it is. Okay, here's our second question. The guy I'm dating is very bad at texting back. He's great in person, but when we aren't together, he responds with emojis and one or two words. How can I tell him to stop? Um, First off, we can't control people. And I think that sometimes if somebody is in their 30s or 40s and they don't communicate well via text, I'm not saying that people don't change or that they don't make accommodations for love and so on and so forth, but it might be hard to change people's way of communication or they prefer. Like, I really don't like talking on the phone. And so unless you have a specific topic, like, please don't just call me for unless I like. If we're just friends, like, I need don't just call with nothing to talk about. So I think that everybody has like really unique and specific preferences when it comes to communication. And I think it's important not to try to change people because we want them to be doing something in line with the way that we prefer to be communicative. But I think it's also important to ask ourselves, is it necessary how we want somebody to communicate? So if when we're together, it is good and I really enjoy or we enjoy each other's company, then text messaging is sort of a byproduct. Like maybe it is what you are saying in the text message that is not doesn't elicit a really firm response from somebody, right? Like maybe you're not being direct or clear. Maybe you are like throwing out innuendos. Maybe you expect a text message every time that you send something and it's not reciprocated because that person doesn't know that that's your expectation. Maybe they have a career or a job or a family system that doesn't allow for them to be really present with text messages throughout the day. I know for me, I am very bad at responding to text messages. I end up responding to them maybe 2 or 3 days later, but I can get in the mood even with talking on the phone. I might be in the mood to talk on the phone, and you don't need a topic. I just gonna cold call you and talk about whatever I feel like talking to you about. Um, Sometimes I'll send like 20 text messages at one time because I'm in the mood to text. And then like I'll forget and not be able to follow up with all of them and just, you know. So I think it's just really important to know people's rhythms and to get to know them and to know what elicits people's response. And then, you know, maybe it's asking a direct question. I think maybe you might have to say to this person if you really value this way of communication. Like, hey, I really like affirming text messages. I like receiving affirmation back once I have asked or said something. What can I do better to get that from you? And the person might say, you know what? I'm really bad at text messages, but I will promise that at the end of the day, if we haven't seen each other, that I will make the commitment to respond to whatever text message in the best way that I can. But if somebody's love language doesn't center around like the whole back and forth that sometimes we need, then I think that we need to, you know, be cognizant of that. I was thinking about a friend or a possible friend. I think we're friends that I met recently, and really cool conversation. Um, the value and emphasis on like communication and text messaging are a little bit different, and so I in my person was like, oh, I won't be texting because the energy is not being reciprocated, you know, in the friendship. But then I was thinking to myself, after talking to that person and faintly mentioning that I found it to be a little bit problematic that they didn't respond specifically to things that I was asking. Like then I start thinking like, well, maybe I'm the problem, and maybe people just don't know how to initiate or follow through, or maybe they think that they have done something that your expectations are so high that they haven't really met them, but they've tried. And so I think it's a really important. Then this is just in friendships. In relationships, I think it's a whole different ball game. Like the communication has to be optimal in a relationship. For friendships, it's like, you know, I'll call you or you call me and we'll get in touch with each other some kind of way. Maybe today's a heavy texting day. Maybe we might be going back and forth on the phone call. But I'm also that kind of friend that we just might not hear from each other for a few days. And I think that that's okay. It doesn't mean that as long as when we reunite, we're good. Like that's what matters to me. Like I don't need the everyday kind of thing because it just depends. Like today I might just be really church focused and really not have time for alpha, right? And or there might be days when I'm really like deeply engulfed in alpha stuff and I don't have time to um really entertain things that are unrelated. So I think it's important to know people at the end of the day. And I think it's important to be able to clearly articulate like what your needs and expectations are with regard to how you communicate with people. I think there are some people that I can think of that I would like to communicate with more. And I think that sometimes, or differently, if you will, but I also feel like, you know, you have to be in tune with energy as well. And somebody who wants to talk to you will make the effort, even if it means them taking a look at their own style of communication in order to accommodate yours. But also, there is the potential that people don't know how. And so that's why communication is key. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't know, but you asked me, that's what I say. Okay, final question. I'm dating a minister. We have so much fun when we are together. The problem is he refuses to take photos, post them, or even invite me to his church. It's beginning to get annoying. Should I continue dating him? uh, so this is one that I didn't really take a lot of notes on because I was like, I can really freestyle about this for about 30 minutes. I think that, well, first of all, as a preacher, as a person that is influential in Christian spaces, I want to ask why sometimes people treat like that differently from, like, if you're dating a lawyer, you're not going to the, bar mixer. Like, you're not going to everything as soon as you start dating somebody. Like, they have to feel comfortable because it means something to, tag along to events early on in a relationship as it's developing. I think that in church in particular, as a man, and I think men have to be careful, especially those who are ministers, have to be careful about how often, especially if we're actively dating, how often we expose people that we are dating to congregation because it can look really trampy if you don't, if you know what I mean. Like, if I'm dating, multiple girls and they all have to come to church, like, then it's gonna look like, okay. I personally have had a few situations where I can think of one instance where I was really interested in a young lady and she came to hear me preach somewhere. And I thought, like, to me, that's really important depending on what stage we are in our relationship. This particular time I was preaching at another church and some other friends came along, and then we went out to eat afterwards. There is a lot of community and a lot of vulnerability associated with a man or a woman who, when they get done preaching, and it's a really sensitive thing. And also, like, you, especially for, because people kind of have this thing around like ownership of the preacher, like, that's my preacher, or that's my pastor, or that's, and so they're very, I've had people tell me directly, if you're going to get married or whoever you're dating, I need to approve them or I need to talk to them. And this will be like regular parishioners, like, oh, I don't know why, but I think a lot of times like people do take ownership, and so sometimes the lack of exposure for you to his church may be an effort to protect you, right? And if that is not happening, rather than looking at it as a potential like end all be all, I think you could also look at it as a measuring stick with regard to how far along your relationship is coming. So when you get to that point where he's willing to invite you, that could mean that the relationship is growing. You can have a conversation with him about that. I really don't want to be a secret, and at what point will our relationship be more visible? Now, I think you have to be careful with this. I think you really have to be careful with this. Don't be having this conversation after one or two or three dates, right? Like, just, pace yourself on the exposure that you want to have in somebody's life. And then don't have a different expectation for the preacher than you had for the rapper or the lawyer or the comedian or somebody else who also operates in a very visible way. Because sometimes, like, especially if you're already visible, you just want to have some aspect of your life be private, right? And it's not about the person as much as it's about, just protecting yourself. The other thing is, people are, now this, I'm going back to the idea that it might protect the person that you're dating when you don't overexpose. People are mean, right? People are just mean. And it is sometimes that protection is I don't want to expose you to these people so that they can run you away before I've determined whether I want to be serious with you. So take that into consideration. I would pace myself on when to have that conversation. I would not end a relationship because the person is private. I would ask questions. I would learn more about why privacy is important to him. Um, I would um, I would be wise. And I would not, especially if you are very interested in him, because the reality is if you're dating to marry and you marry a preacher, like you're going to understand that need for privacy even greater when people already feel like they have ownership of him as a minister. So take that into consideration because I think it's really important. And I'm kind of speaking up from firsthand experience because, like, I really like I want people at my church, people that I minister to know that I'm actively dating because I want to be married. I want to be in a committed relationship, but I also don't want people to feel like we're making a group decision because we're not. Like it's a decision for me, and it has nothing to do with who people think I should be with or what she should look like or all that. I'm not like you have no role or involvement, and so that's why. Like as much as I respect your opinion is separate from my decision making, and I think that that might be what this particular minister is trying to communicate in your relationship. So, you all, I want to thank you for the time that you have spent listening to my podcast. I want to encourage you, if you have questions that you want to have answered on the podcast, do not hesitate to hit me up. I want to give a shout out to my little brother, Dario Beaumonte, who submitted a question. He wants to know why I don't sing a song before I preach. And the reason why I don't sing a song before I preach is because God has called me to preach and not to sing, and I have to be really led by the Lord to go into any type of performative stuff. But anyway, thank you all for being committed listeners. Please, please, if you think this is interesting or something that would benefit others, please do not hesitate to share it. Share the podcast. You can always go to www.seasonedwithsaltpodcast.com. I am also, this podcast is also available on a variety of different platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Google, and pretty much just about any of the popular platforms for which you might listen to podcasts. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to engaging your questions in the near future, and have a blessed day. And remember to let your words be seasoned with salt.
Seasoned with salt.